Hi, Book Warriors. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My cat's trying to join us too. This is Emmy, and she's being a pain in the rear. But we have Amber Royer here tonight. And you guys, if you've come to some of our events before, you've probably met her. We've had her on, and we are so happy to have her back. You might notice Melissa is missing tonight. She had a little bit of, well, I shouldn't say a little bit, a family emergency. I don't think she'd mind if I said this. Her father was taken to the hospital with some breathing difficulties. So send up prayers, please, and positive vibes. But we've got Amber here tonight to show us how to make her truffles. I actually made some of these in advance, so I can show you my variation on them. But Amber, why don't you tell us about the Bean to Bar series that kind of launched all of this?
Okay, so the book that just came out on the 1st is Out of Temper. Show you the cover real quick. And this is the third book in the series. It starts with my character. She was a physical therapist and she lost her husband. She decided to move back to Texas, where she opens a craft chocolate business. So she does modern bean to bar and actually bean to truffle chocolate. And I kind of joke with the hashtag about that it's not bean to truffle, it's bean to trouble, because these whole murder things seem to follow her around, which you kind of got to have if it's a murder mystery. There's also a pastry chef at her shop who does bean to baked good. And so they have two very different takes on how to cook with chocolate. And I'm going to show you Felicity's truffles tonight. She takes Cajun heritage, Italian heritage, because that's hers. I'm Cajun and German, so I've got kind of a little different spin on things sometimes. But we did this basil and lemon candy lemon peel brownie that was amazing, and it was all of my favorite Italian ingredients. So there was espresso and all that kind of stuff. But one of the favorite Cajun desserts of all time for me is bread pudding. So I decided to have in the first book, she's showing off some of her truffles, a bread pudding inspired truffle. And I didn't really think about what I was going to have to wind up doing with that until I decided in this book she was going to demo that truffle. And I had to figure out how I would actually make something that reminds you of bread that's in a truffle. And it took me a while to figure that one out. And we actually decided to do malted milk balls. So this is just some crushed up Whoppers. And it gives you the feeling like there's toast or crusty bread. And there's so much in these books that deals with food and her sensibility and Carmen's sensibility that I've had a lot of fun getting to create these recipes.
That was very clever to do that. I love bread pudding too. Every time we go gambling in Shreveport or go through Louisiana, I always get bread pudding if they have it at a restaurant, because you can't find it that many places. I love the sauce especially. I think if I could just buy that sauce and pour it over pancakes stuff, I would love that. So
I've got a recipe for that too.
What did you say?
I have a recipe for that too. It's up on the website.
Oh, I'm gonna have to go look for that then, because that is yummy, yummy, yummy. So I'm so glad you're gonna take us through this tonight. This is fun having our own hosting our cooking show. I actually cleaned part of my kitchen, although it's pretty much we're gonna stay in this one clean square. things kind of crazy over there. So, but your kitchen looks very nice. You've got everything arranged nicely there, and I see your assistant's feet walking in the background.
Yeah. Making sure that our cream is hot, because you got to melt the chocolate with it.
So warm up the cream is step one then, huh?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I want to chime in here. I made a vegan version of your recipe, and I used coconut cream, and it turned out great. So if you're like me and you're trying to avoid, or if you can't digest dairy, you're lactose intolerant or something, coconut cream works very well as a cream substitute. It kind of adds a tiny bit of coconut flavor too, which, not so much that if you didn't like coconut, you wouldn't like it. But if you like it, you kind of go, ooh, I get that little tiny hint.
So I was kind of hoping you would talk about that for a minute, because I wasn't familiar with what you meant by vegan cream. And you said there were several options. So I have a friend who's gluten-free, but also allergic to coconut. So if she's going to do this, what would you recommend for her? What are some of the other options?
So I actually had put it in my newsletter in case people wanted to find out. But there was a brown rice and something you could do that The coconut cream is one. I'm trying to remember now what all was on that website. It seemed like you could maybe simmer down soy milk or something like that. But I've actually seen a vegan cream that came as heavy cream at Whole Foods too. So they actually make a thing that's a vegan cream. I like coconut milk, and coconut cream, so that's what I chose. But yes, there are some interesting options that you can do. But I could probably go find them.
Yes.
Let's see. You can still see me, right?
Yeah. So I'm wearing this bracelet tonight that I got for a competition that one of the chocolate festivals had for making a truffle. And I made it using tea. So you can use water, you can use tea. If you don't want to use milk, just anything that gives it that liquid. And I know normally you think chocolate plus water equals seized chocolate, which is bad. So a little bit of water with chocolate is bad, but if you get enough of it in there, it'll return to silky and make you a ganache.
Cool. Okay, I did find the link. So, excuse me. So the first one is for non-dairy milk and oil. So you use 2/3 cup, some kind of non-dairy milk, soy milk, almond milk, oat milk, and 1/3 cup oil. And they say that that's a good substitute for cream in soups, baked goods, and sauces. Another option is a non-dairy milk and cornstarch, and you would do 1 cup of milk to 2 tablespoons cornstarch. Coconut cream is what I use. Tofu and soy milk, mixing silken tofu with soy milk.
Okay.
That's cashew cream, which I actually had this in a soup. It was really good. One of my husband's girlfriends made it where she boiled some water, put the cashews in there as the water was cooling, and it made the cashews really creamy. And then you puree it or in a blender. So that's an option. White bean cream, which that probably wouldn't be that great. This is good for soups. It suggests not so much baked goods, but that's another option. There's an onion cream, and then a brown rice and non-dairy milk, which it also recommends for soups. But so for baked goods, the coconut cream is one, and then the non-dairy milk with the oil.
I've actually seen people do chocolate and black bean and chocolate and chestnut.
Huh.
And I think if you're going to do something like that, a truffle is probably a good place to do it because it's more forgiving than any other kind of candy or covered chocolate or anything like that. Or if you're making a brownie and you're just making up the difference in the liquid and the egg-like material, because they were doing that to take the place of, with the chestnut, to take the place of the egg as well as the flour. And I thought that was
yeah, applesauce works sometimes in place of egg, and then I have like some egg replacer powder. But the one thing, brownies is kind of the one thing that doesn't seem that I haven't been able to use an egg replacer and have them really turn out good. But I need to play with that some more because like cupcakes and stuff like that, I just use applesauce. It's so easy and it keeps it all moist, which is nice, too. So
awesome. Okay, so if we're going to get started with the truffle, I have Coverture chocolate, and you can use this. You can use the little. I found some discs that they were selling at Winca, that were actual decent dark chocolate, but it was relatively on the inexpensive side, and they can be found in the bulk section. This I got from Central Market, and it's Calumet, which is. I'm sorry, I keep pointing at the wrong camera. This is one of the ones a lot of bakers use. I am not centered on the camera.
Is it CALUMET?
BET or BUT?
I'm not sure.
Jake will look that up for me.
I'm just curious because I'd seen that. And I actually used oat milk and dark chocolate chips that I got at Whole Foods. So this is a vegan option too.
Okay.
Vegan option.
And I've not worked with the vegan chocolate chips, but a lot of times you wouldn't want to use chocolate chips for candy because they put a ton of emulsifier in it.
Ooh.
And like I said, truffles are the most forgiving candy.
Yeah, because mine turned out good, even though I did that.
So I'm just going to chop this a little bit real quick. Okay, it's CALLEBAUT.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I think you have the cornstarch or something that's like CALUMET, Calumet.
Yeah, that's going to be something that's a completely different company, but this is one that a lot of professional bakers use, and so being able to find it as a home cook at Central Market is really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so everything started with the science fiction. I wrote this funny space opera telenovela inspired science fiction piece called Free Chocolate, where chocolate was the most important thing in the entire galaxy.
Which
And
it is.
of course, when I hand sell the book, I get that answer most of the time because, who wants anything other than chocolate, right? So whenever I started researching those and marketing those, I met all these real world chocolate makers. And I got to learn a lot about chocolate. We participated it was either the 8th or the 9th annual Dallas Chocolate Festival. I got to do a reading and I met a bunch of chocolate makers who showed me a little bit of the ins and outs of their business and why they were so passionate about it. And one thing I found, craft chocolate makers are adventurous. Some of them, they started their first career as engineers back when there were no machines specifically for craft chocolate. So they're repurposing machines and literally some of the ones in California, they were Silicon Valley guys, got jaded. There's a company in Seattle called Indie Chocolate, and she specializes in standardized tabletop machines, kind of like you saw on the cover of the book, for people who are just getting into chocolate making. And that didn't exist at the time. And so you talk to all of these people, almost invariably, chocolate making was an accident. It wasn't an intentional first career. It was something they stumbled onto, either because they're passionate about the environment, or they love travel, or they like science, like all of these people who are making machines. I know one guy, he's in Mexico, and he was an engineer for 20 years in Japan. So he worked for Hewlett Packard or something, and they had him in Japan. So when we went to his shop in Monterey, he's doing panned candied nuts or chocolate covered nuts with matcha in the white chocolate. And so it's all of these influences and flavors and everything that people bring back. Mission Chocolate, I believe, if I'm remembering her story correctly, she started out in California, but she's now in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
Oh, wow.
And
is that where some of the cacao plants are? Is that why she's down there?
Yeah, because she's doing a lot of stuff with local fruit and local flavors.
Oh, okay.
So there's a couple of bars that I've tried that have fruit that I had never tried in anything else that were native Brazilian fruit. And then there's one she does that we really liked that was the Brazilian gingerbread.
Ooh.
Which the way it translates out is honey bread.
Okay.
And so it's got the spices. We actually, when I did an interview with her for my blog, we made the little bite-sized version of it, because normally it's a big thing, but we're trying to be moderate in our carbohydrates. So we made little bite-sized ones, and you make the honey gingerbread, and then you glue it together and dip it in chocolate.
Ah, that sounds.
And it's amazing. And Jake's boss is half Japanese and half Mexican, but he grew up in Brazil. And we brought all the leftovers up to Jake's office, and he's like, "This brings me back to childhood. This is spot on."
That is interesting, isn't it? How they say scent is one of the things that does that the most, but flavor and scent are so intricately combined that I can't eat cantaloupe without thinking of my grandmother. Biscuits and gravy. Yeah. That's Granny. But you're talking about the fruit in the chocolate. Some of my favorite bars are dark chocolate with dried cherries in them, and then there's another one that has orange and ginger, and they're so good.
Yeah,
probably I'll eat the whole bar at once. It's supposed to be square by square, but it's like, oh well, single serving size this big.
Yeah. And Mission Chocolate, she was inspired by those flavors, and so she has a bar that's inspired by that gingerbread. Oh. And I'm working on a page on my website for book club meetings, and I have a suggested beverage for each of my books. And part of Free Chocolate takes place in Brazil. So one of the things we're going to get up in the next few weeks is a signature honey gingerbread hot cocoa.
Oh, okay.
So
that's a cool.
I like repurposing recipes, and that's kind of the sensibility that Carmen has in the book.
Well, and it's funny, book clubs do like to do something that ties in and kind of have a theme.
Yeah.
And then, if you suggest something and give them a recipe, you've kind of made it easy for them to decide what to do. We've had some more people join us. Mary Crooks and Chelsea Waters. Thanks for coming, guys. We're glad you're here.
So what I just did is I took my cream and I poured it over my chocolate. The cream was steaming on the stove. In theory, when you make a ganache, you should be able to melt the chocolate just with the heat of the cream. However, I wasn't sure about the timing tonight, so I went ahead and did this in a glass bowl just in case it needs to wind up in the microwave.
Is that the Pampered Chef bowl?
It is. I don't know if you know, but I used to sell Pampered Chef.
Oh, I didn't know that. I had a friend that used to do it. I have 2 of those bowls in the big size and 1 in the small size, and I love those things. I use them all the time.
I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah, half of my kitchen is Pampered Chef. Part of it's OXO, and then just pieces that I picked up here and there. Like I love little dishes from different places. This one that we're going to do for the rolling of the truffles, this came from Daiso, which is a Japanese dollar store. And I love dollar stores in general, so it always makes me happy.
That's a perfect shape for rolling with that, like that. Now, I want to say it's been a long time, but did I bake a Barbie cake in that Pampered Chef glass thing?
You may well have.
I think I did for the school cakewalks.
Because the whole thing is oven safe.
Yeah, I might have had a metal pan, but I'm almost thinking I baked it in the glass thing. But those were always real popular. That was one thing I was very proud of. I could make the Barbie cakes and stick the Barbie in there.
I'm going to pass this over to Jake so that he can reheat it because I think that cream cooled off a little bit. Of course, the whisk is not going in the microwave. Only microwave safe stuff. And while he's doing that, let me go ahead and get started on the other ingredients. And we have a Ninja blender. You could also use a food processor. If you didn't have anything like that, you could just chop it all very finely. But with a truffle, it's different than like a filled chocolate where you might want big pieces of nut or whatever. You want a nice smooth ganache. So we're going to take this and put it in the little, usually you use these to make protein shakes or something. And it goes upside down on the Ninja bullet, which is right here. And
so what makes something a ganache? I was going to ask you that. How does a ganache differ? Like what makes something a ganache?
It's all about texture.
Temperature?
Texture.
Oh, texture. Okay.
And so you can have
a really thick frosting almost, or a really thick.
Yeah. So you can have
frosting and solid.
Yeah, you can have a runny ganache, which you literally pour over the top of a cake or something, or you can have a thicker ganache, but it's got to have something that emulsifies the chocolate. So you would either have dairy, like we have for this one, or your non-dairy substitute. You could even use water. Or you could use some kind of alcohol. We're going to put a little bit of alcohol in this, but that's not what's going to emulsify it. What gives us that chewy, creamy texture is going to be the cream that we've added. But in order to get that bread pudding feel, we kind of mixed the truffle recipe with a rum raisin truffle or rum raisin ball recipe. But instead of rum, I'm using whiskey because it's more traditional for the bread pudding. So,
yeah, I have to admit that when I saw these ingredients, I'm like, black pepper, ground cloves, chocolate, raisins. This sounds like a really weird combination. And then after I made it and I tried it, I was like, this is a really good combination. It's delicious. Okay, so what exactly I'm going to show my ignorance here. What exactly does emulsify mean?
It keeps it from being truly solid.
Oh, okay.
Which is why it's got to go in the fridge to firm up. But it has that bite to it where it's not like a snap like a chocolate bar, but it's got the almost goo, but it doesn't quite when you bite into it.
Okay.
There we go. Look at that. We now have some emulsified chocolate. And I'm going to go ahead and put these things together. So I've got raisins because bread pudding often has a raisin element. And it often has a nut element, so we've got some pecans here. And interesting note, the pecans came from the tree in my parents' backyard.
Ah, cool.
And they harvested a lot of them before the last hurricane. They are in Southeast Texas. So the books are set in Galveston, which is maybe an hour from where my parents live. And when we went to the beach as a kid, that was where we usually went.
My husband's parents used to have tons of pecan trees in their backyard. We'd go pick them up. They were everywhere in the yard. So.
Yeah, my mom keeps giving us more.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
My mom keeps giving us more pecans.
Yeah.
Because they got. Go ahead.
Do you ever candy them? Like coat them with something or?
I have. We've done the cinnamon sugar kind of thing on them. I was talking with, if you're ever in Hyco, Texas, there's a company called Wiseman House. And
I've been to Hyco.
Have you been to Wiseman House? Have you met Kevin?
No, I just drove through going from Burleson to Austin. It was the back road.
Okay.
Traffic.
I also met him through DallasChocolate.org, and he has this wonderful little shop where everything except the malted milk balls are gluten-free. Because there's no way to make malted milk gluten-free. But his son has celiac, so he's very sensitive about people's needs like that. And he consulted with me on how I was describing the demos that Felicity does in this book, because in Out of Temper, she gets invited to go aboard a cruise ship, and she has tabletop equipment, just like I got to see when I did the virtual tour of Indie Chocolate. And way back in the day, I told you I used to sell Pampered Chef. I used to teach cooking classes. I also did 4 different lecture cruises where I was the enrichment lecturer aboard a cruise for Royal Caribbean. So I did demos aboard a cruise ship. So when I was trying to think what I wanted to do with this book, I'm like, I know kind of how that vibe is when you're working, but you're not working, because you're only working when you're doing the demos. Otherwise, you're hanging out with your friends. So I gave her that gig, even though
gig.
it was amazing.
So did you get a free cruise?
They did give a lot of perks for what we were doing, and I would love to do it again. But I talked to them. We just went on a cruise, which happened because of this book. I was doing an article for Fresh Fiction about my favorite things about cruise ships, and I found this amazing sale. And somehow, within the space of a week and a half, we had booked and packed for a cruise.
Oh my gosh. Funny how things like that happen, huh?
Yeah, we were in Mexico a week and a half ago.
Wow.
Nice. It was amazing. I got to drink something very alcoholic out of a green pineapple while sitting on the beach at Costa Maya. It was pretty awesome. Oh, and everything was just like I remembered, as far as the vibe of being on board the ship and the excitement of waking up somewhere new and all that. It was just, it was kind of sad that it was a ship that could have taken 4,000 passengers, but there were like 1,200.
Oh. So I guess that's safer with COVID, but yeah, it is.
People are cautious right now about travel, which is good. And I did appreciate everybody had to be vaccinated if you were over the age of 12, and you had to wear proof of vaccination the whole time you were on board. And if you were under 12, there were certain areas of the ship you could not go because it was reserved for people who are vaccinated would never have to come into contact with anybody if they didn't want to.
Oh, wow.
There were entire floors, like in the auditorium where they did the shows. It was like vaccinated folks down here, everybody else up on this other floor. And they had people coming down, wiping everything. You had to wear your mask during all of the events, unless you were getting your picture taken, because you were allowed to take your mask off for the photo booth, and of course dinner and things like that, or when you were outside. But they took it very seriously. And then all the people who were working with the tours were vaccinated as well. And they had us wearing masks. Like when we went to the second port stop was Cozumel, and we were at an outdoor market, and they were still like, if you're going to approach the booth, you got to wear your mask. And I appreciated that they were taking it that seriously. But they're trying to give people confidence in travel again. And the only way they're going to do that is to make it as safe as possible.
Yeah. Well, it is a concern. Melissa and I were down in Alabama last weekend for 2 events, and they did what they could to try to make it as safe as possible. But it's still a little nerve wracking, because there was meals involved, and so you're taking your mask off to eat. But they'd really spread people out at the tables, which was great. And I think because of COVID, they had sold fewer tickets. So in a way, that was kind of sad that it wasn't quite as big, but it was a more intimate group, and you actually got to talk to people. So the mayor came in, so that was kind of fun. So
yeah, I got to ride the wave rider on the boat all the time because nobody was in line.
Carol Pickett says that I should set my next book on a cruise ship. Think how fun doing the research would be. That would be fun.
You can't house flip a cruise ship, though, right?
Well, I did propose a houseboat for my next one. I haven't heard back from my editor. They have to run it through the sales department to see if they like the concept. But
so your fourth one in that series comes out 2 weeks.
22nd, right? Yeah.
Okay, so about a week and a half.
We're flipping a church in that one. So
I really liked the one with the hotel. It was interesting.
Yeah, I kept seeing these old hotels, and I kept thinking, it'd be so easy to make those into condos.
Yeah.
Just because there's so many of them sitting around. So tell us about your latest book, or is this a good time? Are you in the middle about to tell us something about the recipe?
Well, I was just going to say I added all the spices. So we have black pepper, cinnamon, and cloves, which is what finishes that up. And I'm going to hand this over to Jake. He's going to put it on the Ninja so we get it all nice and smooth.
Ninja. We just had Sarah Merritt join us. She is one of the authors I met at the Alabama events. She writes as SC Merritt, and she has the cutest book covers. Y'all go check her out. And she was a lot of fun. And I won at the silent raffle, so I'm so excited.
What's her book? Sorry, I'm going to mute for a second while we blender. Okay. Let's see here. Tell us your book while we blender.
Okay. Are you going to have to mute both cameras?
Oh, how do I mute my mic? I don't know. I don't know how to turn it down.
Anyway, her name, she writes as SC Merritt, and lots of cute books and dogs forever, campers. So you guys will love them. So check those out too.
So there is a dog in this one. So what I've been doing with Felicity, and it's kind of funny that you have the house flipper thing going on. Felicity's aunt is a house flipper. And so she's going to be staying in different places that evoke different historic sides of Galveston. So she's not actually doing the flipping, but she is currently staying at a hotel. It's on the Bay side, and it's a fictionalized, it's my take on the Grand, which is actually downtown. It's off of the Strand. The Grand is the Opera House. It's I'm blanking on the name of the hotel, but there's one that's downtown. It's off of the Strand, and they rebuilt it after the 1900 hurricane. So there was the original one. They rebuilt it. Then in the 1920s, there was a fire. And then they didn't rebuild that specific building, but that business interest took over a import warehouse and turned it into a hotel. And so that was my inspiration for it. But I already had in the first book, she was in one of the houses that was in that historic district downtown. And I'm like, I need to see the other side of the island. So I moved that in my fiction over to the Bay side.
It's fun when we can rearrange places, right? I've done that too. I've had stories where things are mostly real, but then throw in some fictional things because people sometimes don't want you blowing things up. People on their property. What was the hotel in Galveston? Was it the Galvez that got destroyed by the hurricane?
The Galvez is still there. It was damaged by Hugo, but it recovered. It was the one that was, what was the one that was out over? They returned it into Pleasure Pier.
Flagship?
Yeah, the flagship. Because it was Pleasure Pier at one point. May I have a spoon? Because this is still stuck a little bit. But it was a Pleasure Pier originally, and then they built the hotel. Then when the hotel was destroyed, they decided it would be good for tourism to put back the Pleasure Pier, and Landry's got involved. So all of those big seafood restaurants and all that, they've got a Bubba Gump right there. And there's amusement rides, and it's iconic now. And I think it's interesting that there's so many things that have gone through renewal, and then some things were just past their time. Like they had the what's the name of the one? The Balinese room. The Balinese room. The Balinese room, they decided not to rebuild. It's still that spot for sale. There's a historic plaque, and that's about all that's there.
I
And
remember
there's
that from childhood because we used to go to Galveston too from Austin. It was kind of the closest beach, and I remember going down there and playing a bunch of Pac-Man at an arcade, and
yeah,
I remember my sister and I getting in the water, and I guess it was like jellyfish spawning season or something. And these itty bitty little tiny, or at least I assume that's what they were, would get in our bathing suits and sting us, or bite us. I mean, it wasn't a real jellyfish sting, but it was just really.
Yeah, you got to be careful with the beaches in Texas. You have jellyfish season. There's also times when you get tar, but there's actually a lot more to it, and I want to explore this. I'm doing my outline now for book 4, and I can't decide if this is going to be in book 4 or if it's going to get pushed into book 5. But I've always been fascinated by the concept of pirate treasure.
Oh, yeah.
Supposedly, somewhere on Galveston Island, Jean Lafitte's treasure is still hidden. Now, the thing is, when you look at what happened in 1900, that treasure would be under the 7 feet of sand that they pumped in to raise the island after the disaster. So if it's even still there, the likelihood of finding it is very, very small. But when I was first starting writing, I was a member of the Golden Triangle Writers Guild in Beaumont, Texas. I was all of 16 years old when I joined, and it was an adult level writers group. I remember they had a party one time and I won a bottle of wine, and they're like, yeah, you can't have that. Because I was like a junior mascot member. And I anticipate that happening. But there was a speaker once, and his name was Tom Townsend, and he was there to talk about his fiction, but he also was a diver. And he had written this book called Texas Treasure Coast. And it's all of the shipwrecks that happened along the coast of Texas. So, like I said, we were on the cruise ship. We were snorkeling in Mexico off of the reef. And people love to snorkel Mexico because it's great waters, it's clear and all of that. Texas actually has some good diving, some good snorkeling. You just don't think about it because the water, when you get right up on shore, you really can't see through it. It's very, very
yeah. We had a comment actually from Anjali. She probably joined us a little bit later about if there's a non-dairy option, and we talked about that kind of at the beginning. I made a non-dairy option with coconut cream. That's an option. I believe on the Facebook page I posted a link. I'll double check, but I can post it again to an article with non-dairy options for cream substitutes.
Yeah, and so we're also doing a gluten-free option because we have the malted milk balls, but if you can't do that, you can do rice. Rice cereal is also going to give you a crunch. It's just not going to last the way the crunch from the Whoppers does. So you probably wouldn't be able to, because we froze some of the test batch that we did, and Jake's been pulling them out one at a time, and the Whoppers are still crisp, even out of the freezer. I don't think your rice cereal is going to be able to handle that. It's going to absorb some moisture in the freezing process. So they're going to be a little more perishable, but there are options.
I'm going to go and try to post that right now while I'm thinking about it.
Okay. And like I was saying, with the Texas Treasure Coast book, I've always wanted to do some reef diving. So we're looking at the possibility. We snorkel a lot. Well, I say a lot. Every time we get to the water. But we're looking at the possibility of eventually doing our dive certification, because I would like to do, you can dive man-made reefs that are part of the offshore oil rigs in Texas. And I mentioned in the second book that both of her love interests dive, and they've kind of bonded over this, and they're planning a trip. And I'm like, that trip has to happen somewhere along the series. It's either going to be book 4 or book 5. Book 4 is still in flux. I've got some ideas, and I've got some ideas for book 5, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to divide that so that it works well for me.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I'd be afraid to dive. I don't know that I could know that my life was in a bottle on my back. I just watched. Speaking of diving, if anyone is looking for something really, really good to watch, it was called The Rescue, and it's on the National Geographic Channel, and it's about the cave divers that saved those boys in Thailand. And it is absolutely fascinating, the whole process they went through with that. Speaking of diving.
I've heard good things about that.
It's good. Yeah. I was afraid it might be too sad, because I knew that the one Navy SEAL died, and that was kind of sad, or that the parents, but they really focused just on the strategy of it.
And the upbuilding aspect of all of them being, everyone was shocked that they were rescued.
Yeah. I mean, but boy, they had to really think all that through, and
yeah. I like documentaries in general, and ever since I did the book with the octopus, so book 2, 70% Dark Intentions, she winds up taking care of someone's pet octopus. People keep recommending all these really cool movies involving, the one I've got on my watch list now is My Octopus Teacher. So this guy apparently actually bonded with the octopus. And I've gotten links to a lot of videos where you can watch them change color when they dream and do all these Houdini things, getting out of bottles and solving mazes and stuff. It's really fascinating.
Well, they are supposed to be real intelligent. I don't know if you watch Resident Alien. It's kind of a new comedy. And they have the octopus in there, and they show how smart it is. But I was at an animal welfare conference a few years ago, and there was a guy there that was talking about fish, and we tend to think that fish are not as intelligent. And he was talking about how fish can recognize faces. They've done tests, and they can recognize faces. And we briefly had some fish. Unfortunately, they passed away. It was very sad. But we had one that she would swim. Well, I say she, I don't know if it was male or female, but it would swim over and it would look at us. And one day I was like, okay, this fish is like looking at me, and it was kind of freaking me out. So I went to the other side of the tank, and it swam over there and looked at me again. And I was like, it's like making eye contact. And yeah, that kind of freaked me out. But they didn't, I'll never have fish again. It was just not a good experience, unfortunately.
I don't think I would eat an octopus. They're too cool.
Yeah.
It's like I wouldn't eat a bunny, because I had bunnies growing up as pets, and they were really cute and very cool. Which is one reason why Felicity has a bunny. I also have some friends. If you've seen on my social media, the bunny that's supposed to be Nightly from the book is actually my friend's bunny Yuki, which means snow in Japanese.
Oh, cool.
And he's a little long-haired bunny, and he's so sweet. And I liked that for Felicity, because part of her thing was she was dealing with loss, and she was at a stuck point in her life, but he was part of her previous life. So he came with her from Seattle, and bunnies don't like travel. They don't like cars. They don't like stress, but they're very loyal. Mm-hmm. And I have a part in the book where I don't want to give too much of a spoiler, but I'm on book 3. This was from book 1. So she winds up getting threatened in her aunt's house by the person who thinks she knows something she doesn't. And Nightly does that whole, bunnies are group animals. So they give warnings, and they'll defend people, or usually other bunnies, but if they bond with a human. So he stands up for her and allows her to get away and all of that kind of stuff. So I didn't want him just to be set dressing. And so I explored him in book 1. And then I kind of decided for each book, I'm going to have a different animal that Felicity gets to interact with. And then here I go, I write a book on a cruise ship. So how am I going to get the animal on the cruise ship? Because you can't just bring a pet. So I decided early on that since she's very sensitive about her shop being a murder magnet, now that this is going to be the 3rd murder she's involved in, people are going to be already looking at her as, oh, aren't you going to solve this? And she's still like, I'm a chocolate maker. I was just helping out a friend, right? So here she is. She's on the cruise ship. It turns out they didn't tell her when she logged on to do the demos, it's a murder mystery cruise. They wanted her instead of another chocolate maker is she's the murder chocolate maker. And so she has divided feelings about that, but it also allowed me to harken back to something that happened at BoucherCon a couple of years ago, where they had a demo with police dogs. And it was one of those, okay, all the writers in the room, you want to write the police dog right. Here's some dogs and what their skills are and all of that. And it was one of the things people were looking forward to the most. And so I have a dog who I wanted him to have some empathy. So he's a former police dog who was a cadaver dog.
Mm.
And so Felicity's been through some stuff, and this dog has been through some stuff. So now he's retired from being a police dog, and he's in training to be a therapy dog. And so since Felicity agrees to spend time with the dog, one of the things that they do with therapy dogs is they need them to have positive interactions with others. So she gets to borrow the dog for a while. And so she takes him all over
the time. And let him have a happy time.
Mm-hmm. And of course, being the former cadaver dog, he is in the perfect position to help her find the body when the murder happens. And it happens like her chocolate display. So since we're not at her shop, it's still a murder that's at her little shop on board the boat. And
funny how that all comes together, right? It's almost as if it was plotted.
You pull one strand and then all of a sudden it's like a necklace. It just beads together and you're like, oh, my brain is smarter than I realized.
I think our subconscious brain is working on our books when we're not.
Yeah.
Like when we're asleep and stuff. Because, I'll have that happen sometimes too, where I'm writing along and all of a sudden I'll be like, oh, I can see how something ties together or a theme that I didn't even, consciously realize or something. It's nice when that happens. I wish they would just write the book so we could just wake up in the morning and it would be all.
Yeah, they would just log into your dreams and it would put it on the page.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So how's
as you develop a series, have you found that certain aspects are easier? Because I find that I know my characters and I know their psychological reactions. And with this one, I knew my setting, and it allowed me to focus on some other things about the writing. Do you do that too?
Yeah, it does allow you, to focus more on how you're phrasing things and stuff like that. The one thing that I find hard, the farther you get into a series, is just keeping things fresh. Making sure that each plot, each book is unique. And that can get a little hard, but it's also, it's kind of fun when it's a challenge, because then you can do kind of more things that are a little bit out there too. So that's fun.
So it was fairly simple to put our mixture together. So this is our ganache, and it needs to chill because right now it's still very loose. If you tried to roll that, that would be a mess. You can see I dropped a little bit of it. That was kind of a mess. Through the magic of television, here's one that's in the fridge all day.
Yay!
And so I was originally trying to figure out how people could do this alongside us. And I said, okay, well, you could freeze it for half an hour. But we wound up putting it in the fridge. That's a gentler way for it to get cool. And then you don't have to worry about, did it get too cold? Now I have to thaw it so I can make balls. So I'm going to go ahead and start rolling these. And I've got a scoop. This is also Pampered Chef. Most of my kitchen is. Just so that I can get a uniform size. You can make these as big as you want because it's not like a baked good where it might be raw in the middle or whatever. This is literally, you take the ganache and you make a ball out of it.
I didn't even think to use, I have a melon baller. I didn't even think to use that. I did mine by hand. So mine are all kind of different sizes.
Nice.
And I did some fun things. I used, she had mentioned that we could do rice cereal as an alternative, and I used Fruity Pebbles to make them colorful. And then I did nuts on the outside. You said something about not doing nuts, but I love nuts. So I rolled some nuts on the outside for these. But the first time I bit into one of these, though, I was like, oh, man, the black pepper and the cloves really work. It's so good.
No. Well, I was saying that you could do a nut-free option. But, yeah, there's pecans in this. That was my concern about the cashew cream, though, whether it would clash with the pecan. But I guess you could do mixed nuts. That's fine. So when you do truffles, things get messy. And so you generally coat it with something. So either cocoa powder, if you don't like the malted milk. I think this gives it that feel that it really is bread. And that was the hardest thing for me to figure out, was how I was going to do that. So when you look at the ones you came up with, do you like the Fruity Pebble ones or the plain rice better?
I think I like the ones with the nuts on the side.
Okay.
Yeah. Because this is a pretty elegant recipe.
Yeah.
And I think I kind of cheapened it up. They look cute, but
you can do whatever you like as far as flavors with truffles. And I like that fact that you could take, if you didn't like raisins, you could do like dried cherries. As long as you puree it down, you get that same texture. And it's a lot more forgiving than even baked goods, because as long as you get it thick enough, it's going to make a ball. I've seen some truffle recipes where they did some unusual things. One of them was pumpkin pie truffle.
Ooh, that sounds good.
And it had crumbled graham cracker crumbs in the mix.
Ooh.
So it had that crust feeling almost.
I bet I'd like that. I like pumpkin and everything, though. I'm one of those very pumpkin spice people. Always makes me sad when they go away until the next year. Like,
yeah, Jake is all about the eggnog, and he's like, it's going again.
We had an author, Amy Pershing, who did. She had a book, An Eggnog to Die For, and she was one of our guests back in, I think it was in November. And we made a Puerto Rican version of eggnog that had coconut cream and was very, very coconut based. And it was so good. Oh my gosh, it was delicious.
I think Jake needs that recipe. He looks excited over there.
Yeah, I might still have it somewhere. I'll take a look.
Yeah, I do want to give a shout out to Jake. He is my alpha reader, my cheerleader. When we do in-person events, he's the guy with the square. And when we did the cookbook, ooh, go grab a copy of the cookbook. You'll have to show it because my hands are covered in chocolate now. But we did this cookbook called There Are Herbs in My Chocolate, and it started out as this little pamphlet that we did for the Fort Worth Herb Society. We were very active when we had a house and we had a huge herb garden. And so we started doing some of their demos because I demo everything, right? And so we did a thing. It was you can with herbs. And so it was canning recipes with herbs. We made a little book. It was a lot of fun. And then they're like, how are you going to top that? What are you going to do for the big herb fest next summer that's going to be even more cool? And I don't even remember which one of us came up with the idea, but it's like, it's all herbs and chocolate.
Nice. There are herbs in my chocolate. That's a great cover.
Thank you. It was not the original cover. The original version of it, it was one of my first publications that I indie did, and it was not a great cover. We would sell them in person when I would do demos, but it did not sell well online. And so we kind of retired it. And then I did the Chocoverse. The first one came out, and people, you know, Amazon will not let you take down anything no matter what, as if you've ever sold a copy of it. And so people were like, why do you have this out of print, no cover chocolate book up there? We want to see this. And I'm like, oh, okay. People want the chocolate cookbook. And so we started working on it. And you were talking earlier about how the brain kind of works on stuff and everything dovetails. So we re-released it with new photographs. Can you find the picture of the cupcakes? So we re-released it with these new photographs, and then I was trying to figure out what I'm going to do. Grand Openings Can Be Murder, the first Bean to Bar book, has her grand opening party in it. And Carmen is a shop assistant at the time. She hasn't promoted her to pastry chef yet, even though she has some training. It's a new shop, and she's not sure what she's doing with it, right? And so I'm like, well, Carmen, as this pastry training, she's going to do some cool stuff with pastry. I gave her the sensibility for what she does from this book. And so that recipe turns out to be the cupcakes that she makes for the grand opening party. And so I've just kind of ran with it from there. And she's done a lot of things that take from her heritage, the traditional Mexican recipes. Like we did a beso where it was a chocolate chip beso with instead of the big flakes of coconut, it was coconut flour that had been infused with lavender.
Ooh, beso means kiss, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
and
okay. Kind of kiss it
sometimes
like
people call yo-yos. There's two spheres, half spheres, and then it's glued together with jam.
Oh, okay.
This. Yeah, and a lot of times it's a kids kind of thing where you've got cake and strawberry jam and these big flakes of coconut. Sometimes the coconut's painted pink, kind of thing.
It sounds like those. There was like a Dolly Madison or Sara Lee or pre-made. Was it snowballs that had the raspberry filling?
It's a little bit similar to that, but
Yeah.
it's got more of a bread to it because
Okay.
when you have pan dulce, it's always got more of a bread element than a cake element.
Yeah.
And so
I love pastries, yeah, because they're just the right amount of sweet. They're not overly sweet, but just the right amount. Sarah Merritt said, I should have brought these truffles to the Alabama conferences. I didn't think about it.
Yeah, that's one of the fun things about in-person events is you can actually show up with cupcakes or something like that.
Yeah.
Can't do that on Zoom. I'm like, I'm sorry, you can see how delicious they are.
But to everyone who's out there, if you're looking for something cool to take, like if you have a potluck, I mean, these they come off as very fancy, but they're easy to make. So I've already decided if I ever get invited to a party again with COVID in, but this will be something I'll be making and hopefully impressing people.
So I've done a lot where I think about the different characters in my book who make food, what their sensibility is. So in this book, Felicity gets to go on the cruise ship, right? And so she's not at her kitchen. I do have kind of a phone a friend kind of scene where Carmen is making, she's making these mint pineapple hibiscus empanadas with chocolate dough back at the shop because I have to show off one of those recipes on the bonus page, right? So other than that, Felicity's on this ship and she's not in control of a lot of the cooking. And so I had to think, even though she never gets to meet the chef, what is the sensibility of this fictional cruise line? They only sail out of Texas. And because of that, I'm like, okay, cruise ship fancy meets Texas flair.
Yeah.
And one of the recipes I came up with is a roast beef with a coffee rub. And on the sandwich is pepper jack and pickled okra. And to me, that epitomizes
there.
And so I'm like, what sensibility of the chef on board the boat do you have to get that? And so even though this character never appears on the page, there's still a presence from it. And so one of the ones we're working on still to get up on the website that we're going to do this weekend, I actually had this dish here at a little trendy cafe. It's Benedict is a big thing on board the boats. It's like when we were on board this cruise recently, there was an eggs Benedict, there was a crab cake Benedict, they'll Benedict anything. And at that little cafe, we found chicken fried steak Benedict.
Oh no.
So I'm going to be like, okay, well, I have to get chocolate in here somewhere because none of the other meat dishes that I put up on the site have chocolate. The other one has coffee, and then the brisket has beer because it was just a basic, my mom's beer brisket recipe. She gave me 20 years ago. Right? And so when we do the breading on this chicken fried steak, I'm going to have to find a way to work in cocoa powder without making it ugly. That's the problem with working with chocolate is everything's brown. My hands are currently brown. I'm going to step for a second and wash my hands. So speak amongst yourselves.
Well, I will show everybody close up so you can see this was my Fruity Pebbles truffle with the rice on the outside, so it was colorful. I thought maybe for Valentine's Day that'd be cute. But these are my other ones, and they ended up kind of looking like almond roca. It's got I chopped up. I used my Pampered Chef chopper and put some almonds on the outside. And somebody actually almost ruined almond roca for me years ago because they pointed out how it was something from a cat box. I was like, why did you tell me that? I love that stuff. I still eat it, but I can't help but think that anytime I eat one. That's what they resemble, but these ones taste so much better. So.
Well, I mean, chocolate is brown. You got to deal with the fact that it's going to be hard to photograph. And I had a virtual conversation with a sci-fi author that I follow, and her blog is Bready or Not. And she's always doing, this is the baked good that her husband is taking to share at work. And it's all kinds of different stuff. And I was telling her one time, she was photographing brownies, and I'm like, kudos to you. Those look amazing. It is the hardest thing in the world to photograph a brownie and make it look like anything other than mud. So we did these brownies.
Confectioner sugar or something to give it a sheen, or
you can. One of the cool looks that I like, because I obviously have to study food photography if I'm going to put all this stuff on people's blogs, because when you do the blog tours, you want to make sure you have the best photographs for their site, and then of course for yours. Like how you see these are spaced out. You can take the brownies and space them out in a grid, and it shows that they have edges. It show that there are some cool ingredients in it. Like when we did the brownies with the basil, I took some fresh basil that was left over from making them. We had candied the lemon peel. I took some pieces of the lemon peel, and I took it and put it 3 brownies, not lined up, but catty corner, so you could see that there are edges. Because that's the hard part with something that is just brown and it looks like mush. Find an edge, find a corner, find a top that has a crinkle to it, and highlight that for the camera, and then put something with color. And so I put some basil leaves and lemon peel on top of the stack.
Oh, okay.
And then, of course, I put the book next to it because that's what you do.
What's in brownie pans where they make it where everyone can have an edge, like it's got like a weird thing to it, weird zigzag pattern kind of to make more edges. And that does make it
look better, because a lot of foods, the cut edge either makes or breaks it. It's like when we did the Victoria sponge, because of course it's a cruise ship, there has to be some fancy desserts on board. So she goes to tea in the cruise ship library, which is my fantasy cruise ship library. When we were on board this Royal Caribbean ship, they had a full-on computer lab, but the books that they used to have like a couple of decades ago when we went on a lot of cruises, they didn't really have that so much anymore. There were maybe 20 books you could borrow, unless somebody had been in there and borrowed all of them. I don't know. Because the weird thing was the ships, the sailing prices are so cheap. We talked to a number of people who were like, yes, this is our second or third back-to-back cruise. It was so cheap, we just decided to book some more. And I'm like, I wish the Wi-Fi was good enough, because Jake can work remotely, but not without Wi-Fi. And we got the Wi-Fi package because I was on blog tour while we were on the boat, because the book came out like the day we got off. But the Wi-Fi that I had was good enough to do Canva, but not good enough to do video.
Oh, no. Yeah. I didn't realize that was still a thing. I guess it makes sense because it's probably satellite.
It is, and it's expensive. And that's one of the things I play with in the book. And I was kind of relieved that it was still the way I remembered, because phone calls from a boat are expensive. Wi-Fi is expensive. And I think you said you read the first one, right? So you met Ash, the blogger. Well, he has a bigger role in this one. He actually gets accused of the murder because of something he did on his blog, which made somebody else upset, just like he did something where he almost accused Felicity of murder in the first book. Well, he almost accused this guy of something, and then the guy winds up dead after they have an altercation. And so Ash, being a blogger guy, is horrified at the cost of getting Wi-Fi on board this boat. And then I need him to be incommunicado, so the first thing I do is have his phone thrown overboard.
Oh, no.
Well, the whole my phone battery died or whatever, it only goes so far in books. You got to think of something that's a little different, but still have with it.
That's a good one. Overboard. Yeah, that would be, because then, gosh, and then you can't even tell people you've lost your phone, because not somewhere where you can get access to all your information. That's good.
And then it becomes a thing of, well, you don't want to receive phone calls or texts because it's like $2 a minute. So everybody would have their phone off.
Gives me flashbacks to roaming charges. Remember that all those years ago? We had roaming charges. Yeah. Hi, Valerie. We've got Valerie Sullivan here. Thanks for joining us. So are they all ready?
Yeah. I'm sampling.
Yeah.
So basically, all you have to do is roll them thickly enough that they're not going to still be sticky on the outside, so you don't get the chocolate all over your hands when you pick them up. And then they are ready to serve. I do recommend using something to gauge the size so that you can have a uniform result.
I've noticed that mine, after sitting for a couple days, I like the texture better, actually. It's gotten a little bit drier, and so it has more of like that unique truffle texture to it. Yeah,
and the flavors meld, the booze gets a little less forward.
Yeah, I love this recipe though. I think it's the cloves and the pepper, that combination. I just never realized what a great combination that is, but I can taste both of them, but that is a good combination. And I actually used amaretto too. I cheated on that. I cheated on a lot of things in this recipe, but I love amaretto. I love anything that tastes nutty.
Okay, so you have amaretto, and then what kind of nuts did you put on the outside?
What kind of nuts? Almond, and then some pecan or walnut, whatever was in my mixed nut jar, which I think is
fair enough. So you've got the amaretto reinforced with the almond. I think you need to name that as something different.
Yeah, it's not really a bread pudding. It's just yummy. Truffle nutter, truffle nutter.
You were talking about liking almond rocca. I think that you are halfway to developing a truffle based on that.
Yeah, truffle rocca.
And you could actually incorporate a little bit of it into your ganache. I don't know what the center of that is made out of. It's almost like a peanut brittle feeling to it. Do you know what that's made out of? The almond rocca, the thing that they roll it in.
It's like toffee, isn't it? Kind of toffee.
Okay. So you could make a toffee that's like that, or maybe chop up a little bit of toffee and roll it in toffee and nuts.
Yeah.
And then you could have the truffle with the amaretto.
Sounds good.
That's what I love about recipe invention is you just riff on stuff. I did a takeover for Meg's Cozy Corner, and people were asking for specific off-the-cuff flavor profile ideas. And we, when we were in Cozumel, we found this little coffee shop I saw online before we left, because I always take pictures of myself having coffee every time we visit a new state, a new city, a new country. And I've had coffee in Mexico before, but not in Cozumel. And so I was like, what's the coffee scene like there? And there's a guy from Montana who moved to Cozumel to roast his own coffee. And they source the coffee from Puerto Vallarta, Oaxaca, and I forget where the third one was. So it was all locally sourced beans, and I'm all about the locally sourced beans. There's a place in Dallas that's owned by a mother and daughter, and they go to Chiapas every year, and they do Mexican coffee beans, vanilla, and cacao.
I love Mexican vanilla. I always have that when I bake. Yeah, it's just got a nicer flavor. Yeah.
And they sell that in Dallas, and so we go there a lot. And I'm like, I would love to be able to go see the plantations that they visit. So when we found out there was a coffee roaster doing those local beans, we had to go check it out. And so, of course, I'm getting Café de Olla, and then they did a peanut butter coffee.
Ooh, that sounds good.
It was thick. It had peanut butter pureed into the coffee. I'd never had anything like that. And they said that the owner was the one who came up with the recipe for that. And I'm like, you riff on things, right? And so I had that in my brain. Somebody asked me for, a couple of flavor recommendations for making coffee better at home. And so I was like, okay, well, I have to include chocolate in all of these because that's my thing. So I was like, what if you did Café de Olla, but because I just had it like that week, but you added cocoa nibs to the pot when you're brewing the coffee. So you've got spices and that nutty chocolate flavor. Because I've seen people do the coffee with the cocoa nibs before, and I've seen people do Café de Olla with different stuff, but not together. And I'm like, sometimes when you interact with people, these off the cuff things become a thing because I'm like, that is so going to show up in the next book.
Yeah. You know, you talk about the peanut butter makes me think almost like a Reese's peanut butter cup. Like it would taste like a warm liquid Reese's peanut butter cup. Even though coffee and chocolate aren't the same thing, I would think that would be kind of so. Or you could put some chocolate in. Tracy Hartman says we're killing her diet. Sorry, Tracy.
Yeah. So if you're doing carbs and it's 15 grams of carb to a serving, this is one. You can have one. And that's something that I've been working on is I've done cooking classes and all of that. I've always been about the food and the flavors and all that. Recently, I've started thinking more about nutrition, and we're seeing a nutritionist. We started in December. I have lost about 20 pounds.
Yay!
And
awesome.
My goal, even more than losing a dress size, is to try and develop a healthy relationship with food without having to stop becoming a foodie.
Yeah.
And so the first session that we had, I walked in there and I'm like, okay, I am recipe testing Victoria sponge cake this week. There will be several Victoria sponge cakes in my house. And she goes, well, better to waste it than to have it on your waist. And I'm like, or freeze it. We will find a way to freeze it.
Yeah, you got all that work and it's good. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a hard one. Because I any diet where I can't have things makes me just crave those things. So if it's something where it's you know controlling how much is something, I'm much more about that than
and it's like
something up. I could never give up carbs. I love bread. I love pasta. That would be too hard. But.
It's like the way she has us doing it. It's breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but also morning snack, afternoon snack, exercise snack, which is 2 carbs, and bedtime snack. So it's like I can have one of these or the empanadas that we made. I could have that for an exercise snack because they're kind of big. So they were 2, things like that where I'm kind of scheduling it into my diet instead of just randomly eating it because I made it. And I think that gives me more of a sense of control. But at the same time, I'm becoming more intentional with what I put in stuff. So I'm working on a recipe that we're also going to do this weekend while we're doing the chicken fried steak thing for cookie dough dip. And I'm like, okay, well, it's mostly traditionally based on cream cheese. And I'm trying to figure out if I can substitute a third of the cream cheese with ricotta. And then it would become a protein instead of a fat.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's good because ricotta is kind of. I mean, it does have some flavor, but it probably if you mixed it. Mary Crook said that their hotel chef, she worked at a hotel, made some amazing, different than norm truffles, and they got to taste test them. Ooh, that's a good work perk.
What were the flavors? Do you mind typing those out for us?
Yeah, Mary, can you tell us what some of the flavors were, if you recall? Love to hear that too. Yeah, because sometimes it's the weird stuff that people mix together that it's amazingly good. Surprisingly.
Let me grab and I will show you guys some fun stuff. Can you get the banana wrapper? It's in the left desk drawer.
I see her big. Is that a KitchenAid mixer back there?
It absolutely is.
That's on my bucket list someday, to own a KitchenAid. I still have my mom's old Osterizer. It's mustard yellow from the 70s, but it still works great. I can't complain. It works.
I got that when I was working at Kohl's because I have worked everywhere. So this is some things that I think are interesting, and I bought them to do a blog post, but I'm just going to show y'all while we're here. So one of the chocolatiers that I met is from French Broad Chocolate, which is not far from where Diane and Misa are. So if you look at the wrapper, I didn't understand at first what I was looking at. This is the French Broad River on the map.
That's cool.
And so she does bean to bake good, and parts of Felicity's shop were inspired by her shop and her website. Parts of it were inspired by Dandelion Chocolate in California, India in Seattle, and there's a few chocolate shops in Dallas. Coco Andre is one of them. Where I've taken different parts of what they do. So Carmen's dirty horchata and her affogatos and all that come straight from Coco Andre. Some of the baked goods were inspired by Dandelion Chocolate has a book on how to make chocolate. Like Greg goes to the different origins and talks about choosing trees and educating farmers and all that kind of stuff. And then the last third of the book, oh, Diane has gone away. Okay, the last third of the book.
Was outside barking, so I had to let him in.
Okay, but the last third of the book is recipes from their cafe. And so I did a single origin brownie that was a riff on that. So I'm always inspired by what real world folks are doing. And JL from French Broad sat down with me, and I was able to send her the pages of the book that dealt with the chocolate making process for the first two. And then this third one, she's not in her shop, she's doing demos. So I sat down with Kevin, who's a chocolatier, which is very different than a chocolate maker. But since JL was such a formative part of those first books, when I do giveaways and stuff, I always pull French Broad bars. This one is chilies and chocolate. This is a scorpion pepper bar.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like heat and chocolate? Who in the group likes heat and chocolate?
I've had something where there was some kind of peppery stuff in it one time, and it was good. Sorry about that. I thought my dogs were all inside, and then I heard our terrier outside barking, so I must have left him out here when I started this. Oops. Oopsie.
Anybody respond? They like peppers and chocolate? I recommend that one. Coco Andre does one that has pepitas and guajillo chilies. And then there's a local chocolatier. She's Yelly from Yelly Belly Chocolate. She does a habanero truffle. And then we also have an Isabelli chocolate, and that's run by 3 generations of women named Isabel, which I think is amazing because the little one is like granddaughter, and she's really cute. And so they do a horchata one and it's not habanero, it's cayenne.
Oh, okay.
So it's like the different types of levels of heat. There's something for everyone.
Oh, sorry. We got a little bit of a delay, so we're talking originally. Anjali said her son likes stuff with pepper in it too. So.
Yeah, I highly recommend the scorpion pepper bar. It's one of my favorites because the chili is there, but it's not overwhelming. And then also the one from Coco Andre is one of my favorites because you've got the heat and the nut. I really like pumpkin seeds, and finding a bar that has pepitas and they're still crunchy, it's really nice. So this one I bought on impulse because I love Hawaii. We went to Maui and I never wanted to come home. It was the first time we snorkeled. Jake and I had no idea that we were at one of the premier dive spots in the world. And we were staying at a hotel not far from Black Rock in Maui. And Black Rock is this amazing reef formation. There's a literal black rock on the beach. And then you go out to the reef, and so many people have been coming out there. You could hold out your hand and the fish would come like puppies, because a lot of people would bring those fish food sticks that dissolve in the water. And so I had never really snorkeled that much before. I mean, a couple of times, but not out in the reef, right? So here I am, and I'm holding my hand out like they said, and this school of parrotfish, there must have been over 100 of them, just went, and all the fish aligned and started looking at me, and I was like, this may have been a bad idea. I know parrotfish are people, but and we thought, you know, all of these amazing things. And so every time we snorkeled since then, it's like, it's not Black Rock. And so Hawaii is the only U.S. state where you can grow chocolate, because cacao trees don't like it to get colder than 40 or higher than 90. And so the trees that we've done, there's one in our office that we've had indoors for years because we can do it climate controlled. They're still somewhat, I think Jake's going to bring us a picture. Oh, he's going to bring us the tree because it's on rollers, so we can see it. But we've had this tree for, I think, 6 years now. And in the wild, they would be about 30 feet tall. But this one is about as tall as I am.
Oh, wow.
You can put it where you can see it.
Is it on rollers?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So it's a little taller than me.
Kind of looks like an avocado tree, or it just makes me think of an avocado tree.
It has
Valerie
a little been transplanted, but it is doing better now. So it actually has quite a few new sprouts here and there.
Oh, good.
So, okay, can you move? I named the tree Claude when it got as tall as I was.
Valerie said, McElhaney County Tabasco spicy chocolate bars in a candy shop when she goes on vacation to bring home since she's never seen them anywhere else.
Nice. Okay, if you have a link to that.
To the candy store, yeah. I wonder where they are on vacation where she goes to get those.
Yeah, because there's all these. That's one of the fun things about doing like Facebook takeovers and stuff. One thing I always ask is, where was your favorite chocolate dessert? What's your favorite kind, brand, variety of chocolate? And I get so many cool recommendations, and I get on people's websites and I order things because that's just what I do, especially since we haven't been able to travel as much as we would like. So back to Hawaii and the cacao trees. So you can have Hawaiian grown and processed cacao. And a lot of times it gets grown like in Mexico and processed in Dallas, or it's grown in Brazil and processed in Utah. One of my favorite craft chocolate bars, Amano Chocolate out of Utah, does a Madagascar bar. And Madagascar chocolate is known for being fruity and bright. You would swear there's berries in it. And so one of the companies that's doing some exciting things in Hawaii is Manoa Chocolate. And they did some bars. Who likes fruit and chocolate together?
Me. Then you can tell yourself it's a health food. That's why I like that. It's like it's a serving of fruit. The bars that you got with the Tabasco were in St. Simons, Georgia.
Oh, nice. Okay, I'll have to look for that. You'll have to remind me of that because I don't have the ability to write it down right now.
Yeah.
But as far as fruit and chocolate, some of the bars have these fruity notes to it. French Broad does one it reminds me of a peanut butter and jelly bar. It's a malted milk chocolate, and it has these very fruit-forward notes, and so you almost imagine there's jelly in it. This one literally has dehydrated. Did they call it dehydrated? Freeze-dried. That was the word I was looking for. So they have freeze-dried banana powder in the chocolate. And they have a banana one. They have a passion fruit one. There were 5 total, and one of them was sea salt. I grabbed the sea salt one while I was at it because I like things that are somewhat basic too. I like salt and chocolate. I like salt and caramel and chocolate. You know, that salt makes things all the sweeter sometimes. Mm-hmm. So I haven't opened this one yet. This is my next thing I'm going to try. Jake's a real favorite of his is banana. So when I got this and he saw it in the bag when I got home, he's like, ooh. And so we opened that one immediately. It was really good.
Valerie put a link. She said Amazon has them in tins, not the bars. But there is a link to the Tabasco, and this will be on the Facebook page underneath our thing. And Anjali said Raffio Chocolates is a local company that we love. And if I remember correctly, Anjali was a friend of Melissa's in Northern California, so she's probably talking about Northern California. So it's already 9:19, so we may be kind of running out of time here. Was there any? Yeah, I mean, I could talk chocolate all night. Is there anything? Do you want to talk about your next project, or you mentioned a little bit? You were doing some plotting on that, or?
Yeah, I'm working on book 4. It's going to be called A Shot in the 80% Dark. And I want there to be a different animal in it. And with my writers group that I host, if anybody's interested, Saturday Night Write meets third Saturday of the month, 4 to 6 p.m. on Zoom. Sometimes you get a guest speaker. Most of the time you get me talking about different topics. We had Amy Shojai out. She's a member of the local Sisters in Crime chapter. And she's also an animal psychologist. And I was like, I need another animal that can show up in this book, and it's got to be something fun, and it can't be something I've already done. So it's like a lizard or a cat or a bird or something. And I told her that part of it, as I have it plotted now, I want to have somebody who's making art out of salvage. There's an interesting salvage shop in Galveston where you can get like bits from maritime boats and stuff. And I'm like, I want it to take place in part at a gallery. There's going to be a murder at the gallery, and they got to figure out who shot somebody because this is shot in the 80% dark. That's all I got. And she told me that there are birds and other animals that do art, and that she had a bird once that used to. She would give it an orange or something, and it would peel the orange, and it would get the juice all over it, and then it would like flap itself off. And so I'm like, okay, I think I have my animal companion. He's going to be a bird, and he's going to make Jackson Pollock style art out of food, and then they're going to like shellac it or something. And I love the idea of a witness that can't really be a witness, but they can tell. And so I think he's going to start repeating parts of the conversation that led up to the murder.
Oh, that's fun. That's a good hook. Mary Crook says that they have a vegan chocolate store here that makes both sweet and spicy chocolates, and she's in Vancouver, British Columbia. So I may have to look for that next time I'm up there visiting my son. But yeah, the parrot, or the bird, that's a great idea. That's a neat one. And to have a animal psychologist that can tell you this, that's interesting. So
that'll be this summer, tentatively mid-July.
Okay. Well, we'll have to do this again and make a new recipe in
Absolutely. Gotta have something involving coffee next time, right? Chocolate and coffee. Everybody loves those together.
So why don't you tell people where they can find you if they want to get you on social media and your website and that kind of thing?
Okay, the website's simple. It's www.amberroyer.com. I am Amber Royer author on social media, and you will find me having coffee all over the place and talking about chocolate. And I also teach creative writing, so you'll find me giving writing prompts. One of my favorite ones are, where does this door go? Where does that staircase go? People love to respond to those. And you know me, if you respond to it, I will do more of it. I'm also on YouTube, where I've been doing all these little 15-second food videos. So you can see lots of that. I'm on Facebook. Obviously, I do the Saturday Night Write group. I'm a member of this group, and then some of the other cozy mystery groups that are on Facebook. I love to talk to people. So if you want to shoot me an email through my contact form on my website or catch me in my mentions on Instagram, I'd love to chat.
Sounds great. All right. Well, thank you so much for doing this tonight. I'm thrilled that I know how to make truffles now. I feel so fancy.
I want to see your almond roca truffle.
I'm sorry?
I want to see your almond roca truffle.
Oh, yeah. I think you were doing something. You were doing the thing while I ate it.
It does look a little bit like it, doesn't it?
Yeah. Those ones turned out really, really good. I mean, I am proud of that because I'm not necessarily good at some of this stuff, so I was very proud of that. This is going to be my go-to recipe for me. I mean, definitely. So any of y'all who were, if you weren't making it as she went along, try this because it's easy and it's very delicious, and I think I'll be very pleased with the results and get a lot of mileage out of this. So.
And the recipe's on the bonus page on the website.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks again so much. And thanks to everybody who joined us. We'll see y'all next time.
Bye. Thank you.
Take care.